Hello, friends. This is Ben Bowler from Unity Earth, and I'm here with the amazing and the extraordinary Dr. Kurt Johnson, a friend, a mentor, a partner, an inspiration to so many, and I'm fortunate to count myself among the numbered. Kurt, it is a joy to have you sitting down with us today.
My pleasure, Ben. My pleasure.
This series is part of the 10-year anniversary of onegod.com, and we've been having some really rich discussions around the current dynamic of what you might call interspirituality. And that's a word I first came across through Kurt's book, which I managed to have way back in 2014, 2015. And the coming into spiritual age. So we're going to be talking about where we're up to. There's an Interspiritual Anthology that's about to be released this year in 2025. We'll talk a little bit about our history, Kurt, of how we got to where we are and where we might be going soon. But let me just say a few words about Dr. Kurt Johnson. Kurt has worked in professional science and comparative religion for more than 50 years, well-known author and co-founder of the award-winning Light on Light Press. He's a prominent figure on international committees, particularly at the United Nations. He's published over 200 scientific articles and 7 books, including co-authoring or co-editing award winners, The Coming into Spiritual Age, Our Moment of Choice, Nabokov's Blues, and Fine Lines. Ordained or certified in 5 spiritual traditions, Johnson served on the faculty of New York's One Spirit Interfaith Seminary for 15 years and was on staff of the American Museum of Natural History in New York City for 25 years. As part of Unity Earth and the Interspiritual Dialogue Network, he has been a part of major international events for many years and co-edits 2 e-magazines, The Convergence and Light on Light. Kurt also co-hosts the ongoing Convergence podcast series, originally from Voice America. He serves on core teams of the Evolutionary Leaders, the Holo Movement, and Pro-Social World. And the Evolutionary Leaders is a big part of your hub or nexus of all these things that you are connected to. Kurt, you are a polymath. You are a Renaissance man. You are a harbinger of the new age, the new earth. And I mean that with all depth of sincerity. You really are somebody who is doing everything you can to weave cohesion and unity and harmony and collaboration at a higher order level. And bridging between science and spirituality and many other great divides is really the medicine of our times. So welcome.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Ben. Big time.
So tell us a little bit about how we got here, Kurt, our experience. I mean, part of it, this is a bit of a personal journey for you and me too, isn't it? Because when we were first introduced by Doug King back in 2015.
April, we met in April of 2016.
Yeah.
At Doug's place in Atlanta because he thought we should meet, and the rest is history relative to everything we've done together since then.
Yeah, so back at that time, Derek Graham and I were wielding the onegod.com banner. And this was something that we had the blog, we had articles, we had contributors. And part of that, Kurt, was really to hold a space or a place that was beyond traditional religious forms, but yet inclusive of them. And so we had rabbis contributing and Mormons contributing and people from all sorts of Catholics, et cetera, et cetera. But the point of that platform really was to make that claim that God is beyond all religious traditions. God is bigger than any book. God is bigger than any one cultural, traditional, religious context. And that is truly universal. And yet at the same time shows up contextually through history, through prophetic lineages and revelations and different manifestations, and even shows up individually, personally, in unique ways as well. So there's this uniquely universal and personal reality. And there's a challenging narrative to kind of beat the drum for. And we felt that onegod.com was set up to begin to do that. And it was in that context that you and I first met in 2016.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what's interesting is, like Ben said, so Light on Light is issuing in October. They just went to press 2 days ago. 2-volume set. Each book is about 320 pages on the history of the interspiritual paradigm. So the first volume is Interspirituality, the Heritage, and the second volume is Interspirituality, the Future. And there are 120 global contributors. It's really a who's who of the whole interfaith and interspiritual coterie around the world. Introduction by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, preface by Matthew Fox, afterward by Ken Wilber. And we're really hoping that this will be a marker on this journey of first from interfaith, which is the world of the head in regard to religions, and then to interspirituality, which is really the world of the heart and the world of the mystical oneness across all the traditions. But it's on the 25th anniversary of when Wayne Teasdale named that paradigm, interspirituality, in his book, The Mystic Heart, Discovering a Universal Spirituality in the World's Religions. So what happened is, and here's what's so important about talking about onegod.com, was the decision about where we divide volume 1 from volume 2. And it's no accident that that divider is at 2015.
Yeah.
And if you look at the beginning of volume 2, it starts with noticing everything that happened in 2015. So we have right at the top there is Ben Bowler and his colleagues establishing onegod.com in Australia. And inevitably, within a year, meeting Interspiritual Dialogue, which is what I had founded with Wayne Teasdale in 2002, and joining up to then what then became first our collaborations as onegod.com, and then what became Unity Earth. And what marks it is this: it's quite an interesting surprise. It's actually the beginning of interspiritual groups that were no longer just landlocked on one continent under the same banner. Unity Earth was one of the first that became an international interspiritual group instead of a group on one continent, a group on another. But just by chance, 2015 is also when evolutionary science had the gigantic shift in paradigm away from understanding evolution as just competition to evolution being cooperation and partnership. And those are the books in 2015 by E.O. Wilson and David Sloan Wilson, Yale and Templeton, and that. But that's not it. There's still more. Wait, there's more. And that is that was the year of Laudato Si, the papal encyclical on the care of our common home, which then brought in the whole eco-spiritual connection. And that was, of course, the world of Thomas Berry, who had been a colleague of Wayne Teasdale's at Fordham University, a long story of their relationship. So 2015 was not only when interspiritual groups were coming together on a global level, but suddenly there was the change in evolution toward partnership and Laudato Si. And just the last thing I'll say about that is that when you follow the timelines after that, because of our connections at the United Nations here in New York, we started doing things together as Unity Earth that were truly international. You did programs in Africa, Australia, United States, India, Southeast Asia. We did programs at the United Nations. We did programs in affiliation with the Parliament of World Religions and the annual COP meetings that were happening every year around the world on world challenges. So we were immediately coming on at that point onto the global stage with this messaging. And so it makes not only onegod.com, but you, Ben, and everything that you are as a historical phenomenon, it just places that phenomenon so clearly. There really was nothing going on that was truly international until about 2015. And then, bam, it just explodes. So that's really important.
Well, that's an incredible perspective to look back on, Kurt, and threading together those, those large scale developments from science and religion there with Laudato Si in 2015 as a pivotal year. How interesting that marks the kind of threshold between Volume 1 and Volume 2 of this, which is going to be an incredible anthology. This interspiritual. Marking the 25th anniversary of the publication of The Mystic Heart, Wayne Teasdale being the one who coined the term interspiritual, and what a profound impact. So to mark a quarter century now this year in 2025 with these two extraordinary volumes. And as you've said, it's a who's who of right across the board of people that are contributing to that, a major, major moment of publication when these come out. But going back to that history, it's very interesting because, we had been doing, we'd done the small music festival, small but powerful, in Chiang Mai in 2012, at the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012, December. And then a couple of years later, launched onegod.com at the Parliament of World's Religions, which you just named, this time in Salt Lake City at the beginning of 2025, earlier in 2025. In 2015. But then when I met you and we started collaborating, first on the event in New York, where we're going to come together at the Tillman Chapel, the UN Chapel, and then looking beyond that, and already we're starting to scan out around Crestone, and you'd been doing events at Crestone for years, and we thought maybe we could do a collaborative convergence at Crestone, and that Crestone convergence came July 2017. But we realized at one point that One God was no longer the brand that was going to be able to hold all of these things, because we were, if you like, expanding beyond spiritual theology and interfaith and interspiritual into, the ecological, and with strong indigenous connections. And of course, there are challenges with the word God, which we might get into as well in our discussion. So at that point, we found the URL was available, unity.earth. It was not long after they brought out the new internet domain names with .earth. And so we were able to get unity.earth. And I think I pulled over in a garage station here in Australia, and I rang Derek and I said, I've got unity.earth. And so we knew it was going to be the name that would hold what we were doing collaboratively together with you, Kurt. And of course, it's been an incredible journey since then. I suppose, what's really interesting for us now is to look at how does a world go from the value of religion over centuries and millennia, where religion serves a highly utilitarian purpose in society around connection and meaning and community, and solidarity, the belonging to a group, a synagogue, a church, a community, whether it's Islamic or Hindu or whatever it may be. There is such incredible value that is provided in that cultural, tribal identification. How do we move to a world that's going global? How can we keep that sense of community? How do we keep that sense of togetherness and that sense of solidarity and belonging in a local sense, as well as in a global and in a cosmic sense? But how do we maintain the value of what religion's provided for centuries in a world where we're going beyond the particular forms potentially?
Yeah, well, we asked this question really big time in these volumes, because what we say right at the beginning, because when we state what this is all about, we end up laying out all of these super, super high values that characterize all of the world's religions at their core. And then we have to come out and admit that right now we're in an incredibly regressive period at a global level. And we have to ask, why is that? And we end up asking then, if you look back when the interfaith movement started, and then also interspirituality, you look at writers like Wayne Teasdale or Ken Wilber and others, they were looking at a consistent building of this momentum toward this dialogue between all of the isms and all the worldviews to find the worldview that would work for everybody. So we had to ask, what went wrong? And we really identify three things that the major founders of interfaith and interspirituality didn't anticipate. And they'll be obvious to everyone I mentioned them. The first one, of course, is that there was so much disaffiliation from the world religions at the same time when their structures remained intact, but the public did not stay with them. So instead of having what Wilbur and Teasdale hoped to be the great conversation among the isms, people disaffiliated from the isms, but their structure still remained strong. And that's actually the least important of the three. The second is that we did not anticipate this resurgence of nationalist populism and authoritarianism on a worldwide basis with Trump and Erdogan and Orban and go through the whole list. This change toward what's branded as populism, but what it really is authoritarianism. And it's attractive to people who have a simplistic worldview and want simple answers to complex questions. And that was not anticipated. The third one is even more obvious, and that is the world made a transition from print-related media, which was very reflective, to screen-related media in which there could be all of this misinformation and disinformation and conspiracy theories where the average person now doesn't even know what's true and doesn't know where to go to for what is even a fact. And actually, the scientists that are working around this declared that they called it an evolutionary catastrophe, because how can human beings make decisions about their future when the facts that they have are not what they're being told are facts are not even true? If their media or their politicians are just lying to them all the time. So we entered a new milieu that we didn't expect. And one of the things we say at the beginning is, we don't know how long this will last. We don't know how deep it will be. We don't know how long it will last. But we know that it wasn't anticipated because, you can remember when Paul Ray wrote the Cultural Creatives, and he said a third of the world is already in this progressive, values-laden mindset. Well, what became of that, right? Where did that go? So there was so much we didn't anticipate. So actually, we end the volumes with the same challenge that you just mentioned, which we start asking, okay, if these are the realities right now, that we're really having trouble getting to these high values that the wisdom traditions express, what does the future look like? And if there's still this chance for the high value world that works for all, how do we kind of reset in order to get there? And I think, as Ben, and here's where you're so talented, the way that we're able to communicate through the media now, and particularly through the arts, is just so important, because we have to reach the human heart. The world of the mind is just not enough. It will not be the moderator of the future. So how we're going to drive people toward the artistic, how that's found in the arts and in all those things that are about feeling and caring, caring. Is look around us. The big fault in the world right now is not enough caring at every level. So we ask that same question, and then we just have to reset our course. So I know you're thinking about the future of Unity Earth after 2026, and it's the same question. How do we reset our course? And how to reset it so that we could actually succeed at still what 99.999% of everybody that you interview in the world want the same thing. All they want is a place that's safe to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. 99% of the people. So how then do we get in this mess with narcissistic leaders and power-based leaders that just, throws the whole thing into disarray?
Oh, well, that's an exciting, and turbulent and exciting time. And, it's a transition of everything, Kurt, really, isn't it? Where things are being turned upside down, new possibilities are emerging, things that nobody saw coming are here. And beyond that, it's a time of new creation. I think St. Paul mentions, doesn't he, the whole of creation is groaning with the birth pangs of childbirth. And so in that, let's talk about language, because I think this is really important. How do we then create a unified set of ideas and ideals that can attract people, and yet at the same time they mean something? The only way to offend nobody is to say nothing, right? So as soon as you start declaring or defining or describing, there's an immediate challenge. And in the context, Kurt, I'm talking specifically about religious language. So we know we're dealing with a writing of the way to an overexertion of patriarchy in the planet, and particularly in religion. So the idea of God as a father is something that many people are going to struggle with. The idea of God as supreme Lord is something, while it's inherent almost in every tradition, from Islam and Sikhism and Judaism and of course Christianity and Hinduism in particular. There's had this commonality of Lord, and yet that's a word that people will struggle with. And it's interesting, you look at the etymology of Lord, it's It's the maker or provider of bread. It's an old German word, or an old English word that means a provider of bread. So it's got this sort of interesting history. But my real question, Kurt, is how do we create new language which can still speak to the ineffable divine and divinity, transcendent and immanent, in ways that mean something, but are beyond all the dualities that have brought us to this point?
Yeah. So I think one approach now that I think is very successful and I like is to kind of abandon all of the smaller labels that make you choose between male or female or high or lower, and just ask this question. Source works in this way as well. What is it that is animating this entire phenomenon of the cosmos and consciousness and human beings and love in the simplest sense of that 99% of people who they all want safety and a place to pursue life, liberty, and happiness? What is animating that larger landscape? And I think when we think of that as the cosmos itself, almost as the animator at every level. I know if you read Jude Currivan's work and the understanding now of holographic principles and non-locality and entanglement, and those are big words in physics, but what it means is that the entire cosmos is one superorganism. And as a superorganism, it is likely best seen as alive and also best seen as sentient, just like each of us is alive and we're sentient from our nervous system. There would seem to be something at the cosmic level that is animating everything that's going on. That would allow you to have all the dimensions of science, all the dimensions of the wisdom traditions, the spirit worlds, and everything that we've talked. It could all be, part of one system. And you're actually looking at a system that is animating all of this growth, evolution, and what's within it, and not having to choose anthropomorphic terms that have a ranking system. Because as soon as you get into terminology that has a ranking system, inevitably then there's an out group and an in group. And the only way you're going to get to that 99% of people having the safe space for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is no ranking system. And there's a wonderful actual metaphor from Llewellyn Boulez, one of the great Sufi leaders. And he talks about what he called the Great Valley. And in that Great Valley, which would be that true nature or that place where we all are, there's a place for every kind of food, every kind of dance, every time of celebration, every type of dress. There's a place for everything, and there's no sense of what is better or what is worse, but there's this diversity. Like when you look in nature, and there are tons of, thousands of kinds of birds and thousands of kinds of butterflies and thousands of kinds of flowers, and there's no ranking system. So how we would get to that where there would be a place for everyone to live their life. But as you know, the whole history of racism on the planet is the problem that humans have about what seems to be other than them or different than what they're used to, and how we have been crawling our way up the developmental ladder to get away from this situation of othering or thinking that anything is other. Actually, if you look at the best definitions now of enlightenment or awakened awareness, it's simply that you realize that there is no other. There's nothing that is separate from who you are and who I am. And when you start to understand that, then the rules of engagement, in the sense of how you behave, become different. And the golden rule then becomes real. It can be lived because it's just obviously the truth. So something like that, I think, would work. Source still works. It works well for me. But like you said, the anthropomorphic language is, but why did that happen? Because and you look at the axial age when the major religions started, all of the systems of government were monarchies. So everyone was thinking in the sense of kings and queens and lords and who's serving someone else and who's higher and who's lower. So it was actually just natural that they adopted that kind of language. And here was Jesus of Nazareth suddenly made into a king of all things, So anyway.
No, that's very a beautiful to ponder upon what you're sharing there, Kurt. I think this is really important. I think it's kind of the nexus of our evolutionary leap. You've seen even in my lifetime the evolutionary impulses, then the backlashes to them, then the backlashes to the backlash, and then the backwards and forwards. So, I think Ken Wilber wrote an amazing piece around the 2016 U.S. election, and he laid quite a significant proportion of the blame to the kind of relativistic green meme that saw itself as progressive, saw itself as better than the fundamentalists, coastal elites in the United States, etc., educated, highly educated, yet at the same time had sort of reacted so strongly against fundamentalist religion and national identity to a point of not entirely being able to articulate what it is that they did stand for, and that has been just easily picked apart by the rise of the political movement in America we see today. So going beyond that, I mean, it can't just be a backlash to a backlash to a backlash, or is that how the evolutionary pendulum kind of works or go forward? But at some point, if we're to move from first tier to second tier consciousness in Wilber's model, at some point, it just has to be that pure presence that you're talking about that generates a new field that can include and transcend all of the above.
Yeah, and another thing that's written about a lot, sometimes it's given cosmic significance, sometimes not, but is that the short lifespan of human beings, or relatively short lifespan, means that we tend to repeat generation after generation the same problems and the same mistakes. Because a lot of people at my age, I'm 79, or in my 80th year, depending on how you count, we go back and we say, "Hey, we thought we had achieved so much in the 70s, 80s, and 90s toward this world that we were looking toward, and and what the heck happened?" Well, what the heck happened is you got a new generation that didn't have time to be reflective, didn't, they go by the time you've gone through puberty and you get a job and you get married, and by the time you've met everything that's in front of you as a human being in any country in this world, when have you had a chance to be reflective in any deeper nature, to ask these deeper questions? So we end up having the same mistakes and the same crimes and the same catastrophes generation after generation after generation. And another thing you'll notice too, when you name famous people that are famous to you and me, and other people have never heard of them, major people who move the entire world, and you'll talk to somebody, they've never heard of them. And then in the US, we have the problem, to be honest, that as far as the level of education of our populace, I don't mean this in any negative way, but we're 27th in the world. We're not even in the top 20. So that we can be lied to at the political level and end up voting for things that are against our own interests should not surprise us. Because, how is anyone to judge not only what's true, but to be reflective about what is good policy, of what is good direction? So these things make you wonder, like, is it a can't get there from here situation? That's one of the things I think the older activists among us struggle with. Are we in a can't get there from here situation?
Well, let's leave the humans behind for a minute because we know how problematic they can be, and maybe there is something from outside of the system which is required here for this system to reach the next level of equilibrium. And I know, Kurt, you're a great thinker and student of the emerging fields of non-human intelligences, just to label the broadest kind of category of what that might be. And we're talking potentially about ETs, we're talking potentially about UAPs, but we're also talking about in the spiritual sense that there are intelligences and beings from beyond this realm, or beyond this earth at least, that may have an interest in us getting it right at some point, or at least in the planet being in a good direction. Talk to us about what you see. And it's interesting in the context of what you shared earlier about these three dynamics that nobody really saw coming. What else could there be that we may or may not really see coming that could come and have a big impact on human evolution?
Well, one of the big questions, of course, see, all of the wisdom traditions millennially have understood transdimensional beings. When you look at ascended masters or saints or avatars, all these different terms of folks from the Akashic field or the spirit world or whatever you would call it, that are famous for ministering to mankind through all the traditions, and everyone knows the characteristics. All you have to do is read the mystical literature of these beings that can show up, and they can be in dazzling light, and they can work miracles, and they can go through walls and all that type of thing. Very easy to understand transdimensionalism, both in the mystical traditions and in shamanism. It's a huge part of indigenous tradition. So we've not only got that reality at a global, at a cosmic level, but then we have what J.J. Hurtak calls the pan-galactic community, which would be all the physical planets that are out there in the trillion galaxies that are out there, where it's highly likely that there are not only intelligent species far beyond ourselves, like Michiko Kaku says, they may be a million years ahead of us.
Mm.
And one of the things that explains it pretty well, actually, is string theory, and that is that there are different dimensions that only from time to time right now find ways to intersect, and that what ways that they do intersect are by deep mystical experience, deep meditators, deep contemplatives who then become aware, or in shamanism, as in shamanism, where they are able to open up to these other dimensions. We're seeing that now there's a great article in the volumes on the future of plant medicines and psychedelics as a part of our natural opening up of our own abilities to understand these transdimensional beings. It would seem that a lot of UAP or UFO phenomena is also best understood transdimensionally, because the tendency to shapeshift, the tendency to show up in a way that is so obvious to the people who witness it firsthand that they'll never deny that it never happened. It blows their mind and all of that, that it leaves very, very few traces. And that makes it hard for conventional science then to try to track it down when everybody who had that experience says, oh my God, absolutely, I was there, I saw it, blah, blah, blah. So transdimensionally, that ability of something manifesting in a huge way, but then disappearing and not leaving traces is very common, across the wisdom traditions, and actually in the way that, UAPs and UFOs, respond. So I think understanding that in a big way is important, but it does bring up the question of whether there are other intelligent folks, many of whom may be trying to help us. And what some people make the joke, why would they be interested in a species that has spent millennia just killing itself?
Mhm.
So they tend to kind of leave us alone, maybe keep track of us or leave us alone. But the chance of an intervention by outside forces or animators is very certainly very real and worth considering. I mean, Avi Loeb, who's the head of astrophysics at Harvard, was just on CNN last night, because there's another one of these things coming through our solar system
Well,
that's on a vertical track from outside, which again, he says there's no way to explain the trajectory of this thing unless something is actually propelling it. Because what's weird about it is that it's coming in to our solar system exactly where the people on Earth can't see it.
oh,
And so when you track it, it makes you wonder, how could that be coincidence? So, we don't know.
mm,
But what I like now today is that there's so many people in our age group, and even so many much younger, who are entertaining that we're not alone.
mm.
And on what that means, not only to the intergalactic population community, but to the transdimensional community. Because I don't think there's anyone, particularly from your community, listening to this conversation who hasn't had the kind of mystical experience that has that aspect to it, which is some type of a personage, some type of something that is seen or felt or heard, even by our own corporeal senses. So, I think those are fun things to think about. And of course, we know many people who have had those experiences. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is fun to think about, but also, I mean, we could use a little help from our friends, right? I mean, there is There is that, but you can't help but be aware of the evolutionary value of us trying to figure it out as much as possible on our own, right? I mean, that would be the most valuable way to do it if we could. But then you're facing the question of can't get there from here. Like if you really can't get there from here, then we need a little help from above. But that we are the ones we've been waiting for is another dynamic to that, which is, to what degree can we be the change we want to see in the world? What degree can we be? So both these things can be true, right, Kurt? That, we're going to do everything we can while we're hoping for some extra assistance.
Yeah, and like a lot of us say, what keeps us going is that we know so many people who have raised the bar really high and also live up to it. I mean, I'm so lucky, and I'm sure I know so many people who they have raised the bar really high and they live up to it. And that makes you think, yes, we can get there from here. We know individuals can. We actually all know there are skilled communities now who are getting there together as collectives. And that's why we're doing this book on group consciousness. That's our next book. But yeah, so we may just be that first part of the vanguard that's a bit ahead of its time, but without pioneers, when I looked at what's interesting, there's a whole section in volume 2 on tributes to interspiritual pioneers, and they're all the big names: Thomas Merton, Bede Griffiths, Thich Nhat Hanh, Raymond Panikar, and they're living on today by people celebrating that they were the person who set the standard that we're trying to live up to now. So that's real as well. And I'm sure that you had mentors like that, and I certainly had mentors like that. So that gives you hope that we can get there from here, but that maybe there's just not enough of this yet.
Well, and just to, be clear, when we say get there from here, ultimately, when you boil it down, Kurt, I think we're talking about personal awakening first and foremost. And that is then the forerunner to transformation of our political and economic systems and everything else. But ultimately, it does come down to that personal experience and our own inner reality. And so I note, so when we launched onegod.com those years ago, we highlighted Abraham, who was really, in a sense, the father of monotheism. But we also looked at indigenous cultures, which very, very frequently will use the word, creator or great spirit or some kind of pretty monotheistic concept. And then, looking at all the varieties of spirituality all around that and all of its beauty. I tell you, one of the biggest surprises I had was when we went to Delhi for the Delhi Convergence in 2016. It was a one God. It was under the banner of one God that we went there. And we had Tibetan lamas, high-ranking Tibetan lamas, every type of Hindu and the different Indian traditions. And I was a little bit, wow, is this going to work? How are they going to take this? But they absolutely got it. Absolutely got it. In fact, I don't think one God has been received anywhere as well as it was in India.
Yeah.
It might be a bit counterintuitive, but to some. But the point we were always making is it doesn't matter what name you use. It doesn't matter what concept you use. It doesn't matter what framework you use. Ultimately, we're talking about the one eternal reality. I note your comfort with using the word source. So in the context of us talking about personal awakening, let's talk about that, Kurt. How does source show up for you in your life? How do you talk or hear source? What's the relationship between Kurt Johnson? We didn't prep this, so I put you on the spot here, but just at a personal level, maybe this will be helpful to others. And then how do you see source at work in the world?
Well, I would say, first of all, I'd say, like a lot of other people my age, I love the term, the older I get, the less I know. There's great truth to that, because what happens, I think, for everybody here as you age through all of these stages, all of the things, there's so many things that just fall away naturally. And in the long run, you end up kind of in a field in which there's only the reality of the connection of whatever you are to everything else. And the absolute profound interconnection of everything. and the absolute reality, both at the level of caring and seeing and everything, that there is nothing that is other. Everything is profoundly made of the same thing, is the same thing. You end up falling into that kind of labelless reality where, again, whether to choose God or male or female or all these other words don't work so well. And you end up being in a world where, in that field, where that animated reality, it becomes very clear to you how you are directed. You start to really realize, I know when you read a lot of the great gurus, they say, I don't do anything, things unfold in front of me. You start to really understand, what that means is that it's simply like you're out for a walk, and like you'd be walking down that trail and things are presenting themselves. That's the reality. You lose that sense of the personal self that wants anything, that needs anything, that holds anything, that has any, that has any of that type of thing to it. And instead you are in this kind of very natural sense of just pouring out into that animation that you're a part of. But it's so natural and it's so simple and it's so humble that it doesn't work to have a big deal attached to that type of awakening or that type of a spiritual milieu, because it's so simple and it's also very humble, because you just realize that there's just something that's unfolding. There's nothing transactional anymore. So it's kind of like that. And that's kind of common, I think, to a lot of older spiritual teachers or older, whatever we call these folk that a lot of people revere. They, they speak in that same experience. And that's also why so many of them, when I get a chance to ask them and I'd say, what is your most meaningful spiritual practice now? And they'll just say, time in nature, time in nature. Because again, instead of something that's transactional or something that's has a label, you're just a part of this animated environment that you've poured yourself into. And that's about all I can say. I remember back when when people thought, and all of us did, that awakening or enlightenment meant achieving something. And then, of course, when you read all the great gurus, they say, I found out I was already there, but just didn't know I was already there. Or I found myself on the other side, but didn't know how I got there. There's all kinds of that language. Or like Ajashanti says, I had to fail completely before I could succeed. And I couldn't surrender with an agenda to say, first I must fail and then I'll succeed. You had to truly fail, you know. And if grace is good to you, it'll give you the opportunity to fail at those things that just need to naturally fall away. And I think a part of it too then is to become okay with your own humanness. One thing Ramana Maharshi said, with even in the most enlightened, still personality remains the choice of your favorite sandwich or your favorite song. So it has that aspect of simplicity to it. That's what I love about your article in the 2 volumes. Ben has this wonderful article exploring the personal nature of the God, of the God experience, and the uniqueness of the individual, and how that is so personalized. You know that adage, be yourself, everyone else is taken. It's very simple, but it's kind of a great truth to that. Everybody is so unique. And also you start to realize in a deep way that you can't judge anyone's own personal dharma. And by dharma, I mean what our unique calling is of what is going to play out in our life. And I think everyone, as you get older and you deepen, you start to discover that trajectory, that sense of autopilot, and also that you can't judge anyone else's. You mean, why is somebody so uniquely the way that they are? Why does something excite this person more than that person? Or why do they make that their thing that they want to achieve? All those things, we need all of them, and we need that depth of connection that people have to their sense of their personal destiny. I think the last thing I would say, one thing that hangs on with me and a lot of other people my age, is the desire not to leave any traces. It's really interesting how that works. that you have a sense that you came quietly, at least in your true nature, you came quietly, and you'd also like to leave quietly. And you need to leave an energy that someone else in their incarnation can pick up on that energy and continue that work. But that's not the same as leaving traces. There's something about leaving silently and leaving nothing behind. It's very Zen, where they make the mandala and then they erase it.
Mm.
All the work that went into that mandala, then they erase it. So you start to feel that there's a wonderful poet, and I always forget his name. He was poet laureate of New York, and he quit writing at the end of his life and became a flower gardener because he said, I started to realize that even as a great writer, I was stealing. I was stealing. And I didn't want to steal anymore. I wanted to give back. And the way that I felt I could do that was to raise flowers.
Mm.
And he has this one poem where he's listening to the crickets in his garden and he asks, it almost makes you cry. He says, listening to the crickets, I want to ask, what makes the engine go? What makes the engine go? And then he says, it's desire. It's desire for the dance. He doesn't say desire to own but desire for the dance. And it's really, really beautiful. So,
Mm.
well,
Mm. Mm.
if I think of his name, I'll recommend the poem, but it's called, I'll even have to think of the name, but, it's called Touch Me. And then I'll try to remember the
The
name.
poem is called Touch Me.
The poem is called Touch Me, and it's very short. You can find it on YouTube.
Stanley Kunitz.
That's Stanley Kunitz. That's it. And
Okay.
there's a beautiful rendition of it by someone else.
Mm.
That's at YouTube, and it'll make you cry, but there's a great truth to that. And he also felt that need to leave quietly. So
Well, Kurt, we might close with the poem in a moment, but let me say, with all these books and publications and contributions, I'm not sure how you're doing on the scale of leaving no traces behind, but I know that's not what you were talking about, but you are having a profound impact. One of the books and one of the great anthologies of the last few years was Our Moment of Choice, with the evolutionary leaders coming together and writing about this pivotal time in history. But the question I want to ask you is, to what degree do human beings have free will?
well, I would say that we absolutely have free will within the context of our larger existence. In other words, we have this ability to be sons of God, and even the dark angels and the angels that didn't go dark had that choice. And so and Mother Teresa said that too. She said, people consider me a saint, but I actually behave in the way that I do because I am completely aware of my ability to act the opposite way.
Mm. Mm.
And so in that sense, we are the sons of God, but we're in that unique situation that if we choose, we could mess it up completely. And they all actually say in a lot of the Dharma, whether it's Sufi or in the Vedic, that you've got the choice to get off the wheel if you actually consciously want to do, what's a part of the satanic story of being the Lucifer who goes the opposite direction by conscious choice. You're able to do that because you were born with that same innate freedom
Mm.
that God has. But what's lucky is that it would seem, let's hope, that when we talk about the Buddha nature or the Christ nature or true nature, there's something in us that animates us toward the use of that in the highest way, as opposed to the use of that in the lowest way. And it seems that it's wounding and really horrible experiences that happen to us on our journey that cause us to want to hurt others or to move to the dark. Because when anybody comes out of that darkness and is free of that, they start to realize that that was part of the lie. Part of the lie, and that's why Satan, of course, is always called the Prince of Lies. Part of the lie was that you did not have that ability to be a son of God, a daughter of God, whatever term we use. That's part of the lie. And that's also why in the long run, you start to see that there's only light. There really isn't any dark. Darkness is in that sense part of the light. And by that, I mean spiritual darkness. There's obviously in the physical world, there's light and dark. But you start to get to the point where there's no more interplay of the negative or the dark. And it's almost like I have one person I respect so much and was asking her how she got there. And she said, I didn't do anything. At a certain point, God just took it away, which is interesting because she also had that experience of no negative.
Hmm.
She didn't make any claim about how that had unfolded for her. She said, I stopped for a while and God took it away.
Hmm.
Interesting point.
Oh wow, what a thing, Mo. What a thing it is to be human. Kurt, this is so rich, and I'm going to read the poem, and then we'll close today. So, "Touch Me" by Stanley Kunitz. Summer is late, my heart. Words plucked out of the air some 40 years ago, when I was wild with love and torn almost in two, scatter like leaves this night of whistling wind and rain. It is my heart that's late. It is my song that's flown. Outdoors all afternoon under a gunmetal sky. Staking my garden down, I kneeled to the crickets trilling underfoot as if about to burst from their crusty shells, and like a child again, marveled to hear so clear and brave a music pour from such a small machine. What makes the engine go? Desire, desire, desire. The longing for the dance stirs into buried life. One season only, and it's done. So let the battered old willow thrash against the window panes, and the house timbers creak. Darling, do you remember the man you married? Touch me. Remind me who I am.
Wow. Yeah, it's a tearjerker.
Kurt, we love you. You are a beacon of light and wisdom and friendship to so many. Most importantly, friendship. You're a good friend to so many people, and that itself is makes the world a bigger, beautiful, more bright place. So, thank you for everything. Thank you for sitting down with us today to commemorate this 10 years since One God came, and next year in October, I guess it'll be the 10-year birthday, really, of Unity Earth. In sense of the Tillman Chapel event really being our first public event we did together as Unity Earth, and we're entering our second decade, and who knows what that might bring and what wonders that may see. So thank you, bless you.
Well, one thing we do know, and everybody knows about you, Ben, you have this ability to be a host and to be a choreographer and an orchestrator, which is truly unparalleled. Your ability to be with people, lead people, and just orchestrate with people. It's a gift. It's a gift. And may you have a gigantic future long after I'm out of the picture as well. Just carrying that ability on to really help us get there. Help us get there.
What makes the engine go? Desire, 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 the longing for the dance. Yes, Kurt, on we go from here. Much love to you, and thank you for being with us.